I'm Hala Gorani. I'm an anchor on CNN, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here this evening. I want to thank Ricardo Karam, the TAKREEM Foundation, set up to honor exceptional achievement in the Arab world and among people of Arab extraction and origin. And given the news cycle today, let me tell you, if you can focus on some positive news coming from the Arab world, we shall embrace that this evening. First of all, it is an absolute honor to meet both of you. Carlos Ghosn, thank you so much. The CEO, the chairman of the Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance, an alliance that controls 10%, correct me if I'm wrong, by the way, 10% of the world automobile market, known as Mr. Fix-It. Many companies could use your talents today, orchestrating turnarounds of companies on the verge of bankruptcy, car makers on the verge of bankruptcy. Added to the Automotive Hall of Fame, Chevalier de la Légion d'Honneur here in Paris, Order of the British Empire as well. And there is some news I won't ask you about, maybe off the record, if you want to maybe get a little merger going somewhere. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just asking. I read somewhere, maybe you had that idea on the back of your head. Princess Reema bin Bandar Al Saud, thank you so much as well for being here. You attended George Washington University, and I believe we probably were in Washington around the same time when your father was Saudi ambassador to the United States. Okay. You've worked in leading roles in big luxury groups. I believe Harvey Nichols is part of your purview in Saudi Arabia. You also launched a luxury handbag brand. Yes. Barabooks.
Baraboo.
I was wondering if the X was silent. It is, of course. But you're also a philanthropist. You're an advocate for gender equality and also for breast cancer awareness, which is something that in the Arab world, I know I've done a story on, is sorely lacking. Correct. Because there is some issue there with people believing in some cases it's a taboo subject, so it's good to bring it out in the open. Let's start the discussion because I know that everybody is eager mainly to hear from you too. Mr. Ghosn, and by the way, I asked your team, should I say Ghosn or should I say Ghosn, or what do you prefer?
Well, it depends what's your origin.
My origin is Syrian.
So you
yes,
can pronounce
Ghosn. Okay.
But it's very complicated for somebody who's not of Arab origin.
That's correct.
So that's why.
So we'll say Ghosn. So, Mr. Ghosn, let me ask you, the theme of this panel is leadership in difficult times. Yeah. Not necessarily conflict in the sense that there's war or military conflict, but in difficult times. And no one is, very few people are better placed than you to answer that question. If you were to tell people, how do you lead when there is conflict, confusion, questions? People would say the era we're traversing now is one of those. What would your answer be?
No, I think leadership exists only in tough times. Right? I don't think you have managers, you have presidents, you have whatever you want in times which are good, but the real leadership exercise only in tough time. And usually people want leaders only when they are in trouble. But when things are going okay, they don't care. They have somebody they can accept, even very mediocre, very average people, because they want the institution to work, whether this is a company, whatever this is a city or a country. But leadership is generated in tough time, when people are afraid, when there are conflicts, when they can lose a lot, when they can lose their life. This is where leadership is generated. So the essence of leadership is, first, obviously, to reunite people around a project, and this project is geared at getting people out of trouble in which they are finding themselves. That's leadership.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, because I work for a big corporation. I mean, I look at leaders and bosses and corporate executives, and I wonder, what is it that some are able to get teams to work together, motivate them around a common project, and others are not? What's the magic ingredient here?
Well, the magic ingredient is, in fact, in my opinion, the capacity for people who are in position of leadership, and again, they are in position of leadership because their circumstances put them in a leadership position, because people need leaders when they are in trouble, and frankly, they can accept any kind of direction when they are not in trouble. The capacity, for me, it's the capacity to connect with people. That's the number one attribute of a leader, is the capacity to connect with people. Why? Because, when people are in trouble and they are nervous and they are stressed and they want to get out of this trouble.
And they're afraid. They're afraid.
And they want to turn towards somebody. The first thing they want is not the smartest guy or the expert. No, they don't want this. They want somebody who can connect with them. That they say, okay, if this guy is going to lead us, at least I can understand, at least I can connect, at least I can, in a certain way, find myself into this person. So
can I ask you a specific question in your history, in your past corporate achievements? If we're talking about a group like Nissan, for instance, where really there was talk of this basically car maker dissolving, disintegrating. You come on board, you see this. A lot of people would run 30 miles in the opposite direction and say, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Well, first, I have a conviction, and that's something that I've been preaching for many times, that if you want to make a difference, you need to go where there is trouble. I mean, if you're running away from trouble, there is very little chance you're going to make a difference.
Yeah.
If you really want to make a difference, you need to go where there is a conflict, where there is a company in trouble, where there is a weakness, where people are looking for something different from what they're living to. So, and obviously it happens that I had this opportunity in Japan, a country I didn't know. I came there and I was looking for this. I was fascinated by Japan, so I was very interested, and frankly, I didn't care about being successful or having a failure because I thought it was a unique opportunity. And I cannot explain you why. I connected with Japanese people. I connected.
And that's what's important.
It was not obvious that a foreigner would come in a situation where a company is in trouble, 2 or 3 turnaround plans have been tried, all of them have been failures, and all of a sudden you have a foreigner coming from a French company, and he can connect with the public, connect with the employees, and turn it around.
You're a hero in Japan, by the way. You're an absolute hero in Japan.
Yeah, but I was not.
You were not at the time, but you became so.
I was not at the beginning. I was received, with a lot of doubt, with a lot of skepticism, but I was given the opportunity to try it in a certain way because I committed to results from the beginning, and this is something which ring a bell with the Japanese, because the Japanese have this sense of what they call the seppuku, that means it's coming from the samurai culture, that or you're successful, if you're not successful, you commit suicide so what they call the seppuku. And then, so when you commit to result by saying, okay, I'm going to fix it in 1 year, if you don't get this result, I'm out.
And you said that, I'm out.
No, I said it on TV, I didn't say it on, in a private conversation. I had probably 20 or 30 million people looking at TV, and I said, if I don't deliver this kind of results, I'm out of the job. And they like that. They say, oh, this guy has a connection with the Japanese culture. He has a connection with the Japanese values. So he's ready to commit, even though he's not responsible for the mess in which he's finding himself in.
But I've never been an executive. I never wish to be. But I would, if my boss told me I'm out in a year if I don't deliver results, I'd have a tendency to trust that he's going to commit to the job.
No, this is no. I mean, if your boss is telling you you're out in 1 year,
no,
if you don't,
he's out.
It's a different story.
Right.
It is your boss saying on CNN, I'm out if I don't fix CNN.
Yes.
Is a different
No,
story.
that's what I meant. That's what I meant. I would have a tendency to believe that at least he or she is committed. Princess Reema, it's a completely different environment in Saudi Arabia, especially for a woman working in the corporate world. This is not, as I mentioned before, it's not the military conflict here, but it's a challenging environment. How do you overcome that?
So what's really interesting is I jumped out of the corporate world, and today I'm a government employee.
Okay.
So I can tell you what it is and what it was for me on both sides of the story. I was essentially in the corporate world the first CEO of a retail luxury retail company. At that time, it was Alpha International, and the point that it was created for was it would be the ROI would cover the costs of the King Faisal Foundation. So while it was a profitable business, it was meant to finance and fund a charitable foundation, which is where the core of my soul is. I am essentially a social entrepreneur. So by nature, by default, I am a social entrepreneur, but was put in a commercial environment that allowed me to actually experience a different group of people than I would have experienced had I stayed in this rarefied world of being the princess. From there, I went actually deeper into the world of social enterprise, because what I realized, we were at the point when we talk about conflict and adversity. Not all conflict and adversity is war. Sometimes it's actually a social change that must happen. And the adversity and conflict that was thrust upon us was a positive one with a negative outcome, or a negative moment as we tried to grow out of it. It was the feminization of the workplace in Saudi Arabia. Quotas were placed for women to be included in the workforce. For every feminist in the room, you would stand up and applaud. However, you have to realize, like water in a glass, when you put something in it, you are displacing something else, and that was the male workforce. And that male workforce was an expat workforce, many of them coming to us from Syria, coming to us from Jordan, coming to us from the Palestinian territories. And my question to the Ministry of Labor in Saudi was, where do you think these people are going? Where would you like them to go when they've been in this country serving for 14, some of them 15 years, have given really blood, sweat, and tears to my nation? And it's not just in retail, by the way. It was across multiple sectors. So looking at this from the point of view of a heart of a social entrepreneur and a person who cares about people, while I was very happy for every Saudi woman that had the opportunity, I was profoundly heartbroken for every man of another Middle Eastern nation that had to leave my country for us, because they were working to the benefit of my nation. That was very difficult for me.
Okay,
Now,
but I mean, so you have this situation, but
Yes.
presumably, if you have more women in the workforce, you're
Yes.
creating more wealth, you're also at the same time expanding the workforce base. You didn't think that was a possible outcome of
No,
this?
That's where I'm saying it was
Yeah.
positive and negative in equal measures.
Right.
The positive is today, this is now no longer a problem because
Right.
women have entered the workplace, we've got training, and. Today I sit in a government position, and my role in government is at the Sports Authority. Originally what I was hired for, and when you were talking about breast cancer, actually the initiative that we had created was called 10KSA, and it was to raise awareness on breast cancer for women, and we'd gathered over 13,000 women in one location to create the largest human awareness ribbon, and we broke a Guinness record, and the goal of that was to draw attention to the cause of women's health. And when we were talking about that, I was exposed to the Ministry of Health, I was exposed to the Ministry of Social Welfare, and what became the Ministry of Sport. Because initially I thought you must have sports involved if we're talking about women's health. And when I was exposed to them, I realized, in my naivete, I grew up in the United States of America, I assumed so many things about my country that didn't actually exist. And so 13 years ago when I arrived, I was out of school. I was already out of college. I had my own children. I was 30 when I arrived 13 years ago. So I didn't have this reality of what everybody else knew.
What's your skincare routine?
I'll give you his number. Yeah. But,
Sorry,
yes.
a little
So,
aside.
Exactly. So
Yes.
what I realized was sports doesn't exist in this country for girls in school. There is not a legal gym system for women. So many things weren't there.
So you're highlighting a lot of the issues that I think people who live outside of Saudi Arabia know to be the case for Saudi Arabia,
Yes.
which is that women don't have access to sports. The breast cancer awareness thing is a big one because socially it's not necessarily acceptable to talk about certain parts of the body openly, et cetera, et cetera. But can I ask you just one specific question? If you could give one example of a challenge that you faced as a woman in Saudi Arabia trying to achieve in the corporate world something that was dear to you or close to your heart, and that you found that you had to overcome. How did you, can you give a specific example?
More than the corporate world, and I'll explain why, and it's just a matter of fact. I have a royal title in front of my name. There are very few people who would look at me to my face and tell me no, which by the way is not a positive thing. You have to actually accept that this is not a very good thing because that means you are not always making the right decision. Where I faced a challenge and an obstacle as a woman was in government. Even though my position was a royal appointment, my first week on the job, I would walk into what was then turned into the Sports Authority, and within 15 minutes, there were 60 men outside saying, who is this woman in there? What is she doing? Where is she taking our girls? And she's going to destroy the moral fabric. There were sermons, religious sermons said, where they didn't mention my name. They said, that woman. They wished upon me the gates of hell. I had many compatriots and demons that apparently were my collaborators in all of this. And they rooted it all in...
And that was what year? Sorry if I could just...
2016.
So 2 years ago.
2 years ago, from February till August. In fact, August was the peak of it, where the animosity that I was facing, I was shocked at, because I was being employed by my country and my nation to benefit the women of my country. And I was shocked that the people themselves didn't think that, oh my God, this is great, she's coming to help us. That tide didn't happen until afterwards. But where did it have? It had a really great personal toll on me, and it wasn't what I expected. In the retail world, the challenge that I faced was, how do I include women? How do I create more job opportunities for them? So actually it was quite positive.
Right.
I didn't have a negative.
So in government is where you face those hurdles. By the way, something that you said struck me, that it's not good when people don't say no to you. And oftentimes when you're the boss, and I've seen it in many environments, government, corporate, people are afraid to say no. They become yes people around you. How do you avoid that? How do you stay, because then you're not challenged, are you, if everyone's always saying yes to you?
Well, I'm not going to talk for the political area or in government, but in companies, what people are telling you, yes or no, doesn't matter so much. What matters at the end of the day is your performance, the performance of the company. And you have a clear scorecard. I mean, the company is evaluated every 3 months, every 6 months on how much are you growing, what's your level of profit, what's your, you have very clear indicator on which, if you don't make these indicators, no matter how talkative you are.
Sorry to jump in, but to get to the indicator, you have to surround yourself with the right advice, right?
Exactly. So because you're saying what is important is at the end of the day the scorecard, and the scorecard is not 10 years down the road. It is every 3 months, every 6 months, every 1 year. You want to be surrounded by people who are going to tell you what are the best idea to get the scorecard.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not a question of trying to please this person or not. We're not into the political arena where you don't know what is a scorecard. You don't know what is a scorecard. At the end of the day, in a democracy, the scorecard is the vote.
Yeah.
Okay. So people just play the vote. They say, okay, if I'm voted again, that means I'm doing something right. Okay. So no matter what you're doing. But in a company, it's not a question of vote. You're not there because you're the most liked person.
Yeah.
You're there because on growth, on profit, on a vision for the future, on technology, on brand power, you're doing the right things. And as long as you're doing the right thing, you're going to continue. Obviously, you're not doing it alone. You're doing it with a team. So what you want is to be surrounded by people who are going to help you get the scorecard, not by yes man or no man. That means this doesn't matter. It matters about what kind of result you're getting.
And
so it's a completely different, I would say, approach than if you are, for example, in government.
But it takes a certain kind of character to be able to see how to get past that yes man circle, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you do that?
What's really fascinating is I see it when I see my colleagues with our chairman. I see it when I see people when we make presentations to the royal court, let's say. And I look at something and say, do you know what it means to challenge a leader? It's not necessarily a bad thing. We must always, I can tell you because when we create presentations to present to senior leadership, we always put in there, what is the risk? What is the impact? What's the social impact? What's the economic impact? So that when we present it upwards, it's the whole picture.
Right.
My colleagues would look at that and say, but he just asked for X. Why are you giving more? And my point is we are giving more because the intention is to create positive good and positive impact. It's not just to deliver X. It's so easy to say I was asked to do an event. It is not so easy to say I would like to do an event that is inclusive, that has diversity, that creates jobs, that has sustainability. I think when you come from the private sector and you have to deliver the KPIs and you have to think of who am I accountable for, when you understand marketing and you know your audience, when you understand delivering longevity and brand adjacency, you can actually create better programs. And so I look at myself as a private sector social entrepreneur in a government entity, and I recognize I'm an anomaly. And I know for a fact they look at me as the crazy woman that's just arrived into the office, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I wish we had an example of someone from the corporate world becoming a very high-level political official. I can't think of one.
But the President of the United States, huh?
Yeah, I was just kidding. I wish we could assess whether or not bringing your corporate savoir-faire actually works. How do you, Carlos Ghosn, I have a question that I'm personally curious about. How do you, after decades of being at the highest levels, keep your enthusiasm? Because it's very easy to be tired and to be exhausted by the same challenges, right? So how do you stay motivated?
Well, first I have many jobs.
Yeah.
When I started as CEO of Nissan, then I accumulated with the CEO of Renault, then we put the two companies together, then recently we have Mitsubishi Motors joining. So The job is growing, it's not the same. There is no routine. So you have a lot of things to fix. You have also to create synergies between the different company, even though respecting the identity of the different company. So I think the key to this is not finding yourself in a routine, which by the way, is something which exists only into the non-competitive sector. That means if you are in a country which is protected and you're the only producer of a good, then you can get bored. Now, if you are in one of the most competitive activity in the world, which is transportation, and particularly in the automotive industry,
yes,
you're not going to get bored because threats are coming all the way. Technology change, expectation change, emission change, rules change. This is one of the most controlled products in the world. The car. That means it's controlled on safety, it's controlled on emission. You have competition all over the place. You have the competition 10 years ago. Now you have new competition with the Chinese. You have the tech company coming your way. So there is no way you're going to do the same thing. So I think the key to stay for a long time is to make sure that your job is changing and you're being challenged all the time, which in a competitive sector is.
But how do you choose your area of passion? Because did you know from the beginning this is what you were passionate about?
Well, finding area of passion is a luxury, which is only for the people who are successful. That means when you're not successful, you're striving to get success. That's it. It's not a question of what am I passionate about. Is I need to deliver. Let me make sure I'm working on what's going to help me to deliver. Now, when you deliver, then you have the luxury to say, okay, what am I passionate about, and then can I dedicate?
But how did you know that it was this?
But in my case, I'm passionate about diversity. I'm passionate about cultures. I'm passionate about our product because I think transportation, even though we talk about the industry like, 95 million cars are being sold every year, this is a $4 trillion industry, etc., but we don't talk about the fact how much a car can change the life of people.
Yeah.
Because obviously we are sitting in Paris, people say, oh, I don't need a car because I have so many possibilities of transportation. But somebody in India, or somebody in Brazil, somebody in Russia, getting a car, it means getting an education. It's getting an employment. It's to transform the life of people. And the social part of transportation, of autonomous transportation, is being forgotten in developed countries, while it's an essential part of the development of the developing countries.
And you know whose lives the car is going to change?
Yeah.
The women of Saudi Arabia.
That's another group of people. What do you make of that, then, what's going on there in Saudi? With the female, there's a loosening of some of these rigid rules.
Specifically with driving, when I was working in retail, what is really difficult to measure is the productivity of an employee who does not have transportation in their own hands. How do I judge her if she has to come to work late? How do I judge her if she has to leave work early? How do I judge her if she can't make it to work at all? Because many times I was in that situation because you're constantly at the mercy of this individual, whether it is a paid driver, a husband, a brother, or other. But I also would like to remind people it is not just women who are stuck with not being able to move. It was a hostage situation for every man in every relationship. I think every Saudi family will have a happier marriage because women will drive, because there's no more nagging about get me here, take me there, drop me off. All of that is all going to dissipate and go away. That narrative is totally gone. But when we talk about mobility, it is not just the mobility of the woman to get from her location to work. It's also the social impact of mobility. Is how do I now choose to use my time? How do I choose to spend my money? How do I choose to get myself and manage my day? That is a liberating cause.
Before I open the floor up to questions, I just want to have one last question for you on Saudi Arabia. Forgive me, but I can't remember the car maker who immediately came out with an ad for the women of Saudi Arabia. I don't believe it was it? Okay, we won't talk about that then. Let's move on. So but in any case, is your market, what do you...
Why do you mention this advertising?
Because I found it clever. Because right away, the car maker went in and said, we're going to sell you cars, women of Saudi Arabia. What's your plan for Saudi, for instance? You see that market opening up.
No, the market is open. That means the market is open, but the market is going to increase and grow because now women drive. So there is a good prospect in Saudi Arabia. So that's the way we look at it. In in the Middle East, there are two main markets.
Yeah.
Two main markets. You have Saudi Arabia and you have Iran. These are the two main markets of the Middle East. Because Saudi Arabia is about 1 million cars sold, 1 million cars sold a year, and Iran is about 2 million cars sold a year.
It's a much bigger population.
But when you add these two markets, the 3 million cars sold, this is more than 50% of all the Middle East. So in a certain way, these two markets represent the, what the main car makers pay attention to. Saudi Arabia from one side and Iran from the other side. Now, Saudi Arabia is an open market, while Iran, as you know, it's a closed market.
Yeah.
So they are completely different systems. So in Iran, if you're not producing in Iran, it's difficult to sell cars in Iran. While in Saudi Arabia, you can sell cars coming from all over the planet. So two different markets, as you know,
and a whole new customer base, hopefully for you.
Two very different customer base.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to ask people, because we have 10, 15 minutes or so of questions. Rani Rad would like to ask a question. He is one of my high-level executives at CNN, the president of CNN, who's here, who we're going to give him a microphone, hopefully.
I don't think I need a microphone. It's not really a question as much as it is a comment. I think the first ad that was made for Saudi women driving was actually Nissan. So in defense of Mr. Ghosn, it was actually a Nissan ad, and it was the father teaching the daughter, but you don't know it's the father until the reveal at the end. So they show you this guy teaching a woman how to drive, and then at the end you find out it's
without knowing it. I had then
well done on that ad, and
there you go.
Congratulations on
well, that's good, but I was not aware about that.
Well, there you go. So you have such a good team that they.
Unfortunately, as we advertise in 200 countries with about 80 products, so it's difficult to
follow everything.
The advertising campaign. But I'm glad that it was not Saudi Arabia.
Any questions from anyone? Sir, yes, please.
Yes, may I suggest that there are different types of leaders. We have leaders in politics, we have leaders in business, leaders in research, leaders in education, etc. Would you agree that two main characteristics of leaders are, number one, determination? They have to be determined for what their goal is. And number two, they should be able to get the best out of the people that work with them. And this is in itself, is, I think, an art. Would you agree?
Mr. Ghosn first.
Well, determination, there's no doubt about it that I don't think you can get anywhere without determination, because if you're in trouble, because again, if we agree on the fact that leadership is needed in period of trouble, you're going to have a lot of obstacles in front of what you want to achieve, and if you're not determined, you're going to stop somewhere. So I totally agree. It's a basic condition. Cultivate people around you. That's great leadership. But there are plenty of examples of leaders who didn't do that. I mean, they got extraordinary results without cultivating people around them. This exists.
You wouldn't call them leaders then?
Well, because somehow people turn to them, accept them because they want to get somewhere, which is difficult. I mean, the definition of leaders is obviously it starts with crisis, but also it's getting people to do things that usually they don't want to do or they don't like to do, and feel good about it. This is leadership. I mean, you don't get leaders when things are going okay and people are happy about it. And this is not leadership. This is managers. This is president, whatever. But the real leader is the guy who's going to get you to do something you don't want to do or you don't like to do, and then at the end of the day feel good about it. Mm-hmm. And there are many examples, even in the corporate world, of people who are celebrated as great business leaders, who were atrocious people.
Could you name?
No, you know.
Come on,
names.
Just one.
You read the books and you need the names and you
I don't know.
that. So there are counter examples of people who have been great business leaders, which were atrocious with other people. You have political leaders also who were atrocious with the people around them, but they got through wars and through crisis, and they crossed this period because they were determined and because they were able to connect with their people. In history, you have plenty of people like this. I was reading the story and seeing the movie of Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
This is a great example of somebody who is considered as a leader who was not so tender or did not develop so many people around him.
Yeah.
In the corporate world, you
That's
have plenty
very
of
true.
them. Now, this doesn't mean you have both sides. You have great leaders, but you have leaders also which in a certain way did not manage to have the consensus of people around them.
And Princess Reema, I'll let you take the next question then from Madame in the back. If you could say your name and also ask your question.
Yes, my name is Farid Al-Allagi. I'm from Libya. Happy to see you, Reema. Very happy. In 1981, the luck, I was in the opposition overseas, and the luck and the political circumstances brought me to Saudi Arabia, 1981. And I was an activist, I was in the opposition, I was working for women. I came to Saudi Arabia, and with the United Nations, I stayed 1 year. But then I was lucky and fortunate to have a job offer from Prince Talal. And you mentioned the no. I told the prince, you are a prince. And I noticed everybody around you tells you yes, yes, yes. I left Libya because I have to say no. And when I need to tell you no, that's no. And my dignity is beyond everything. So, for 20 years, I lived in Saudi Arabia. I worked in Saudi Arabia. I know every village with women. And all my friends were telling me, and you were very young, Reema, at that time. And everybody was telling me how you can stay in Saudi Arabia. And I was not defending the Saudi women for me. I was fortunate and lucky to have spent 20 years of my life in Saudi Arabia. They are the strongest, the powerful, the really given. I learned a lot from them. So, Reema, I'm happy to see the day. I listen to you. I have been sending WhatsApp to all over the world to tell them this is what I've been betting on Saudi women. Keep doing the good job. And really, women, and now I'm coming to you, Mr. Ghosn, about women. It's not, and with all my due respect to the men, and I was lucky to have a gentleman next to me here who thinks that, and many are starting to think that under no circumstances this region can be controlled, whether in business or corporation, by men, or in politics only by men. So the door is open now. I can see the younger generation, and I hope, Mr. Ghosn, with your philanthropic contribution, you really invest in young Arab women, in technology, in science, in business, and in education. Because I'm almost confident, although I feel very saddened, I've been against the Gaddafi for 40 years, I'm again in exile, but I cannot give up because I think the younger generation, the women in this region, and the youth in this region, I'm betting so much on them, and the good few Arab men who are not threatened by you.
Yes, there are many strong women,
All right.
and a lot of people seem to think that this is the year of the rise of the Saudi women. But the women that you're seeing today are the women who have had PhDs for the past God knows how many years, and masters and. They've all been there, but the opportunity for them to be seen, to work and to rise was not as public as it is today. And many people ask why. Is it because of this vision? Is it the Crown Prince? Is it or is it not? It's multiple factors. There's no one singular factor, but what it is it's the right time. In order for Saudi Arabia to play as a player regionally, you have to recognize both sexes, both genders. You must have an equal playing field. Otherwise, it is an irrational ask. And if we would like to move, as much as we want cars and thriving women to drive and all of that, if we will actually move away from a dependency from oil, you have to have other income.
Right.
This is why what I'm doing, to me, is so exciting in sports, but there's also the creative economies that are all rising in Saudi with equal opportunity, men and women, and redefining what is a meritocracy. Come out, deliver, and perform, not because you're a woman will you be given the job, but because you deserve it. And I think that's the difference of what's happening today in Saudi. Don't place me because I'm a woman. That was maybe 5 years ago. Give me the job because I deserve it.
Sure. Yes, sir? Oh, And I'll get to you second, but our honoree from later would like to ask a question, so I'll give him the microphone first. Dr. Yaqub, yes? Yes.
I'm going to ask a controversial question.
Oh, I love those. I've been trying, yeah, go ahead.
Do we really need to have a leader? In the first, do we need leaders? Is there another model of achieving the same thing by creating a culture of, call it what you want,
Collaboration
excellence,
or
work ethics, intellectual freedom? Is there a place for all that, or do we always need a leader?
Mr. Hossain?
No, I don't think we need leaders all the time. I mean, again, if your definition of leader is somebody who is an institutional leader, President of a republic is a leader by definition. Maybe you don't consider him as a leader, but he's by definition a leader. The mayor of a city is a leader. I'm not talking about that. You know, I'm not talking about these people. I'm talking about the leadership that you recognize, that this person is a leader, which is not the institutional leader.
It's
talking
the quality.
about the people that you recognize
Right.
as this is a leader. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. So if you're telling, if we're talking about the leader recognized as a leader, not in a certain way respected as an institution, I don't think we need leaders. We need leaders only in situation of crisis. When you are in a situation of trouble. I'm going to give you one example. I'm going to give you one example, which is a very common example. You all fly planes, and you know that today planes can fly without pilots. They are automatic pilots. I mean, planes can fly without pilot. But one of the reasons for which you don't remove the pilot from the plane, because nobody's going to get in the plane without the pilot. Even though you tell people the plane is more dangerous when there is a pilot than without the pilot, because most of the accidents that happen are due to human mistake. So, in a certain way, you have the institutional leader. You feel good to have a pilot in the plane, even though he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But you don't care about the pilot in the plane unless there is trouble.
Right.
All of a sudden, you smell smoke in the plane, there is a fire, there is somebody. Then all of a sudden say, oh my God, who is the pilot of the plane? Okay? And then you pray that you have somebody that you're going to trust. So it is exactly the same thing in countries at war, in economical collapse, companies which are in difficulty. You care about leaders, you pay attention to the leader when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
If not, it's just a kind of institution leadership where you can have a very common guy, you can have a very respected guy, but doesn't have any of the quality that you require, but you don't have a crisis.
What about the driverless car? Would you get in one?
Well, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting one. The driverless car is not something which is required by people today. Consumers are not asking for driverless cars. Who's asking for driverless cars? The companies are asking for driverless cars. Companies like Uber, company like Alibaba, like Amazon. Why? Because the biggest cost today of transportation is the driver. So if they can get rid of the driver, they're going to reduce the cost of the transportation by 80%. So there is nothing which can really better than that for them. It's just a commercial use of cars that's going to lower the transportation for sectors for which it's vital. So, but consumers are not asking for it, and I don't know how much they're going to.
And also,
really
there was an accident in Arizona, and that caused a big problem there. But I want to get to, thank you, Doctor, and I know we'll be honoring you later. And I just wanted to get to Mr. Salim, who has a question there as well.
The microphone or not?
Well, I think for the people yes, farther from you, you'd need to talk.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Mr. Ghosn a question asking about Lebanon, a country of your origin. And speaking of driverless cars, one think maybe Lebanon would do better without many of its leaders who mess things up. But I want to ask about the economy. In Paris, just a few days ago, there was the big Saud conference and pledges to the Lebanese economy. We're coming up on elections. Lebanese do so well around the world, both in the economic field and other fields, and yet the Lebanese economy continues to hardly grow at all. Do you see any hope in the Lebanese economy? What would your advice be?
Oh, that's a tough one. No, I mean, Frank, I'm going to tell you.
Leader for tough times.
No, I understand. But you know, leadership starts with always a diagnosis. You can't transform anything without making a diagnosis of the situation. And I have no access to any information allowing me to make a good and objective and lucid diagnosis of the situation of the economy in Lebanon. I don't know. So you ask me, frankly, I don't know. And I think if there is something missing in Lebanon today is an objective information about what the situation of the economy, so you can have an assessment about how to fix it. I didn't meet one single person who was capable in a very simple way to explain to me exactly what was the problem. Because, when you have a statistic, it's contradicted by many other people. You try to go to other statistics, etc. You don't have that. So that's why I think probably the problem is much more simple than we think. But we don't know because you don't have the access to the basic information which is necessary to assess the situation. Now, often in countries where people are individually brilliant, you have weak communities. And Lebanon is not an exception. Lebanon is a perfect example where Lebanese in general, individually can excel, and excel not only in their country but outside the country. But unfortunately, collectively, we don't get this kind of results where 1 + 1 + 1 make 3. Usually 1 + 1 + 1 in Lebanon make a number which is much lower than that. This is the reality. This is the reality. So you have the individual excellence, the sense of performance, the sense of competition, the sense I can do. But then when you come to the community and you see the kind of problems which are unsolved, you're a little bit disappointed by saying, oh my God, all this talent to get this kind of results. And the scorecard in a country for a citizen like you and me is obvious. Do you have an environment which is clean? Do you have traffic? Do you have infrastructure? Do you have health space? Do you have safety, etc.? When you look at the scorecard, unfortunately you have to answer, you don't. And then you come to the questions about how come that so many smart people can get to such a poor result.
Yes, and if...
Can I just say?
Yes?
It's fascinating that you say that because right now in Saudi, I've been appointed to a committee called the Quality of Life. And that Quality of Life committee addresses two things which you touched upon, the lifestyle and then the livability. And it is how can we, for the average Saudi citizen, create the satisfaction and the sense of fulfillment in livability and in lifestyle. And it is just that. We have so many talents that were untapped, unstrategic, unguided, and never really harnessed for their full potential. For us, obviously, it comes because we were a service society versus a service society, and we had to do that huge shift. The raw talent is there in Saudi as much as it is in Lebanon. Do you have a leader to harness it? Do you have a vision to draw it together? Do you have a point you'd like to get to that is unified? For us in Saudi, you had to come up with what is our identity and something that we could collectively rally around to get to. That's where we got to. And when I look at a lot of my friends from Lebanon, when we were studying in the States, honestly, I was so ignorant. I didn't realize the different sections in Lebanon. I didn't realize the different backgrounds because we were all in college and we were all enjoying ourselves. As I got older, I began to realize this section, that segment, this family, that family. And I think it's only when there's a rallying cry to a singular cause that will help drive everybody to come together.
Well, that is the tragedy of the Middle East. Arabs get along great when they're outside of the Middle East. Somehow that doesn't always end up being the case. We have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, I think we could be up here for many, many more hours. Carlos, Ghosn, and Princess Reema, thank you to both of you, and thank you again to the TAKREEM Foundation and Ricardo Karam for organizing this evening.